The wind had a mournful voice that morning, as if the land itself knew it was bearing witness to something holy and hollow all at once. Jonah McCrae stood alone behind his cabin, knees sunk in thawed dirt, hands blistered from digging. The shovel leaned like a tired soul against the wooden cross he'd staked in the earth, fresh pine, bark still clinging. At its base, a tiny bundle whimpered softly, swaddled in a quilt his wife had sewn from old shirts and church dresses. The baby's cry sounded too loud in the silence left behind. Her name was Clara. Jonah said it once, out loud, then didn't say it again. Saying it felt like splitting open. He'd buried Martha, his Martha, with no preacher, no psalm, no choir but the whistling wind. She died bringing Clara into the world. Rupture, the midwife had said, as if the word wasn't meant for cloth and timber. She stayed long enough to wipe the blood, then left with eyes too sad to meet his. The crib stayed empty in the corner, wood still smelling of varnish. By the second night, Clara's cries scraped against the walls of the cabin like claws. Jonah tried everything he knew, which wasn't much. He rocked her with rough hands, whispered broken lullabies his mother used to hum. She cried anyway. He stared at her, helpless, ashamed. So he did what a man like him wasn't supposed to do, he asked for help. At sunrise, he wrapped Clara to his chest with his old cattle-driving scarf and walked the path into Whistle Hollow. The town hadn't changed in years, general store, post office, saloon with broken shutters. But now it looked smaller, colder, like it knew what he carried. He knocked on the door of Martha Whitlow, the preacher's sister. A righteous woman with eyes like frost. She opened the door just a crack. "I need someone to help feed her," he said, voice gravel-thick. She looked at the baby, then at him, then pulled her shawl tighter. "Ain't there family you can send her to?" Jonah shook his head. "I don't run no orphanage," she snapped, and shut the door before he could beg. He tried 2 more houses. At one, a curtain fluttered and stayed still. At another, a man came to the door and simply said, "That baby ain't my concern." The sun rose higher. Clara's face turned red from hunger. Jonah felt the weight of her more than her size. She was grief and guilt and fear in one fragile form. There was one more place, though he'd sworn he'd never step near it again. The Boone house. Delilah Boone lived alone on the edge of town in what used to be a boarding house before folks stopped renting her rooms. She was all rumors and whispered warnings, unnatural, twice jilted, a woman who talks to shadows. Jonah didn't believe in curses, but he believed in pain, and Delilah wore it like perfume. Her porch creaked under his boots. He hesitated before knocking. He could already hear the townsfolk sharpening their tongues. The door opened slowly. Delilah stood barefoot, a flour smudge on her sleeve, dark hair pinned loose around her face. Her eyes were gray like smoke, and steadier than he remembered. Jonah swallowed hard. She hasn't eaten since. I don't know what to do." Delilah looked down at the baby. Her expression didn't change, but something in her shoulders eased, like she recognized the weight. She didn't speak right away. "I'm not asking you to raise her," Jonah said, suddenly aware of how broken his voice sounded. "Just feed her. For now." Delilah nodded once, then stepped aside. The house was dim and quiet, dust floating in shafts of morning light. She led him to the parlor, where faded portraits stared from crooked frames. Jonah sat awkwardly in a chair by the hearth while Delilah moved with quiet purpose, lighting a fire, warming a cloth, preparing a bottle like it was second nature. She took Clara from him with gentleness that stung. The baby stopped crying the moment her lips found milk. Jonah watched, fists clenched on his knees, eyes heavy. "She's hungry," Delilah finally said, her voice soft but firm. "How long has it been? Since Martha died?" Delilah's hand stilled. She looked up. "I hadn't heard." He nodded. Didn't have the heart to ring the church bell. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the soft suckling and occasional pop of the hearth. Jonah stared at the fire, jaw tight. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted. "I thought I could just hold it together. But she cries and he swallowed. "I keep thinking maybe it'd be easier if she'd gone with her." Delilah didn't look shocked. She only nodded, slow and sad. "That thought comes to mothers too, sometimes." Jonah blinked. "I had one once," she said. "Didn't last long." He didn't ask what happened. She didn't offer more. After a while, Clara drifted to sleep in Delilah's arms, her tiny fingers curled around a loose thread in Delilah's blouse. "I'll take her back now," Jonah said, reaching out. Delilah stood but didn't hand her over right away. "Bring her tomorrow," she said. "Babies need feeding regular." Jonah hesitated. Then nodded. As he stepped outside, the wind had changed. Softer. Less cruel. He looked over his shoulder once and saw Delilah standing at the doorway, still cradling Clara, not like a chore, but like a memory reclaimed. He walked home with empty arms, but somehow didn't feel as alone. The days settled into a rhythm neither of them spoke aloud. At sunrise, Jonah walked the same dusty trail to Delilah Boone's house, baby Clara snug against his chest in a blanket that still smelled faintly of her mother's soap. He never stayed long, not at first. He'd hand the child over like an apology, mumble something about the weather, then retreat back into silence before his grief betrayed him. Delilah never asked questions. She simply took the baby into her arms, fed her by the firelight, and let the house fill with the sound of something almost like peace. In a town where whispers traveled faster than wind, that quiet became their haven. But outside that porch, words curled like snakes. "They say he leaves her with her," hissed Martha Whitlow, clucking her tongue over a pile of potatoes at the market. "Widower or not, a man don't keep company with a woman like that unless he's got shame to bury." "You seen the way she walks now?" another woman murmured. "Like she's got purpose again. Like she's earned something." The gossips sharpened their tongues on Delilah's back, but she bore the weight with the same silence she'd carried since her boarding house emptied and her fiancé left her with nothing but dust and a name she refused to change. Jonah heard the murmurs too. At the blacksmith shop, men dropped hints like horseshoe clinks. "You sure she ain't feeding more than the baby?" one chuckled. Jonah let the hammer fall hard enough to silence them. Inside Delilah's home, time bloomed like a soft bud. Clara began to grow, eyes wide with wonder, fingers reaching for light through the curtains. Delilah sang lullabies in a voice that once sang for guests over supper plates. Her hands remembered the motions of care, though her heart still flinched at every ache of memory. One morning, Clara wouldn't stop crying. Her fever wasn't high, but her cheeks burned, and her small fists punched at the air like she was angry at being alive. Jonah had lingered on the porch, unsure, but when the wail pierced the wood, he knocked. Delilah opened the door with Clara pressed against her shoulder, face pale and drawn. "She won't settle," she said, exhaustion under her eyes. Jonah didn't hesitate. He stepped in, took the baby from her, and began to rock her awkwardly by the hearth. Delilah watched him, arms folded, not coldly, just weary. "She misses her," he murmured. "Martha used to hum when she rocked her. I can't remember the song." Delilah closed her eyes. "Hush, little baby," she said quietly. "All mothers start there." She sat beside him. For the first time, their shoulders brushed. Neither moved. They watched the fire dance while Clara's cries dwindled into hiccups. "She deserves more than this," Jonah said, eyes fixed on the flame. Delilah turned to him. "Then what?" "Then two broken people fumbling through bottles and blankets. Then hand-me-down lullabies and half-empty homes." "She deserves love," Delilah replied. "That's all. And you give it, even when you don't know how." He looked at her then, really looked. The way her face held lines carved by more than age. The way her hands always moved with purpose, even when her eyes were far away. "You ever wonder why folks hate you so much?" he asked suddenly, not unkindly. Delilah laughed, bitter and quiet. "Because I remind them what they're afraid to become." He nodded. "I think they're afraid you survived." Without begging. That evening, as he prepared to leave, Clara fell asleep in Delilah's arms. The baby stirred when Jonah reached for her, so Delilah rose and laid her gently in the old bassinet by the fire, a piece she'd once rescued from a junk cart years ago. Jonah stared at the scene, woman, child, firelight, and something inside him twisted, unfamiliar. As he turned to go, Delilah's voice caught him at the door. "They asked me today," she said, not looking up, "if she was mine." He hesitated. "What did you say?" "I didn't," she replied. "Not yet." The next day brought storm clouds. Jonah arrived late, soaked to the bone, shirt clinging to his shoulders, breath heavy. He carried Clara close and wordlessly stepped inside. Delilah had a towel waiting, and for the first time, he let her dry his shoulders without flinching. That night, Clara's bottle slipped from Jonah's hand, crashing to the floor. The baby wailed, startled. Jonah cursed softly, defeated. Delilah kneeled beside him on the floor, picking up the shards. Their hands brushed. Neither pulled away. "I'm no good at this," he whispered, shame thick in his throat. "You're here," she answered. "That's more than most men ever are." Jonah looked at her then, heart raw. "She needs a mother." Delilah froze. For a moment, everything held still, fire, breath, time. "Then find one," she said, her voice trembling. He stood, throat tight. "You think I haven't thought of that? You think I don't lie awake wishing I could give her someone better?" "Don't give her someone better," Delilah said, rising to meet his gaze. "Give her someone willing." Thunder rumbled in the distance, like something old and angry waking up. A week later, they walked into town together for the first time, Clara snug in Delilah's wrap. The street fell silent. Men paused mid-whittle. Women stopped mid-whisper. At the general store, as Delilah lifted Clara to adjust the fabric, a woman nearby asked sharply, "Is that your girl, Miss Boone?" Delilah straightened, eyes calm. She is now, she said. Jonah said nothing. But in the stillness that followed, he reached forward and adjusted the wrap on Delilah's shoulder, not as a man protecting what was his, but as a man standing beside what he had finally begun to understand. And the town, for once, had nothing to say. Spring came slow to Whistle Hollow, as if the land had forgotten how to bloom. But beneath its stubborn chill, green pushed through, small blades of grass between porch planks, a lone crocus near the well. Inside Delilah Boone's house, something softer bloomed too. It didn't come with thunder or declarations, but with the quiet grace of routine. Clara began to smile in her sleep. Her legs grew chubby, her eyes brighter. She reached for Delilah's braid when she was tired and cooed at Jonah's beard when he leaned in to kiss her forehead. And still, not a word was spoken of the future, just one day, one bottle, one stitch of life threaded into the next. Delilah found herself humming while sweeping. She hadn't realized until Jonah paused at the door one morning and said, "That tune, it's the same one Clara comes to." She smiled without turning. Maybe she remembers more than we think. They began to share the work and the silence, with a familiarity that neither of them dared define. Jonah started bringing firewood in without asking. He fixed the back gate, mended a broken stair. Delilah taught him how to test the bottle's temperature on his wrist, how to recognize Clara's cries, hunger, sleep, worry. He listened as if the knowledge was sacred. One evening, the wind howled against the shutters. The fire burned low, Clara cradled between them on a patchwork quilt. Jonah stared at the flickering light. "Do you ever miss what was supposed to be?" Delilah didn't answer right away. Her hand rested over Clara's chest, feeling each breath. "I used to," she said. "But I stopped mourning things that never arrived." Jonah glanced over. "You think we're enough for her?" "I think we're the ones who stayed," she said, voice steady. He looked down at Clara. "She doesn't cry the way she used to. She trusts the world now." Delilah whispered, "No. She trusts us." And it was then Jonah realized, this wasn't about what was lost anymore. It was about what they were choosing, moment by moment. Not out of rescue, not from duty, but from the slow, raw ache of love taking root. The next Sunday, they walked to town again, this time not to buy, but to be seen. Jonah wore his good shirt, the one Martha had embroidered years ago. Delilah wore blue. Not the blue of morning, but the soft blue of clean sky after storm. Clara was dressed in white lace, cheeks pink with life. They stepped into the churchyard just as the bell rang. Martha Whitlow noticed them first. She turned to whisper, then thought better of it. A hush fell over the congregation like dust settling after thunder. The preacher paused mid-verse. Delilah didn't flinch. She stepped forward, Clara on her hip, and met every stare with the calm of someone who had nothing left to prove. After the service, a woman, older, quiet, approached. She looked at Clara and asked gently, "Yours?" Delilah didn't hesitate. "I'm her mama now." The words weren't loud, but they landed like stone in still water. Jonah exhaled, slow. He hadn't known how much he needed to hear them spoken. Not because he doubted Delilah, but because he'd finally let go of the idea that family had to look like it once did. That night, after Clara was put down to sleep and the lamp burned low, Jonah lingered in the doorway. "Is it all right?" he asked, voice unsure, "if I stay a while longer?" Delilah looked at him, not surprised, not startled. Only thoughtful. Then she moved aside, letting him in. He sat across from her. The fire cracked, faint and steady. Their hands found each other, not out of hunger or grief, but a shared quiet. "She called you Mama," Jonah said, barely above a whisper. "She didn't need to," Delilah answered, squeezing his hand. "But I needed to call myself that." Jonah nodded. "I reckon I need to stop calling her Martha's." "She'll always have Martha in her," Delilah said. "Just like she'll have you. And now, she's got me too." A soft wind moved through the open window, warm with the scent of lilac and hearth smoke. Clara stirred in her sleep but didn't cry. Her dreams, it seemed, were safe now. Later, long after Jonah had fallen asleep in the chair by the fire, Delilah watched them both. The man who had walked through sorrow to ask for help. The child who had turned grief into new life. And herself, a woman the town once feared, now at the center of something tender and whole. She whispered, mostly to herself, "Sometimes the life we build from ashes is the only one that's truly ours." And if you're listening now, if you've ever stood at the edge of something broken, wondering if love can come again, remember this. Family isn't always born. Sometimes it's built with bare hands, in silence, with bottles warmed by firelight, and held together by the courage to stay.